The first thing anyone would notice was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that feels heavy, like the world is holding its breath. A police cruiser sat crooked on the shoulder of a lonely highway, its engine still warm, its blue lights long dead, and inside it was a sight no one could have imagined, a police officer bound tightly with rope across his chest and mouth, eyes wide with fear, while a powerful K9 in the back seat stared through the glass with a low, warning growl. And just behind him, a Marine in camouflage leaned close, one finger raised to his lips in a silent command to keep quiet, as if something far more dangerous than the ropes was lurking just beyond the car. If you believe in kindness, courage, and second chances, this is the kind of story that deserves to be shared, so before it unfolds any further, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this remind us that even in the darkest moments, humanity can still shine. The officer's name was Daniel Reyes, a man who had spent his entire adult life protecting people he didn't know, often putting himself between danger and innocent strangers without a second thought. That morning had started like any other, with the quiet hum of the radio, the smell of coffee in his cup holder, and the promise of another long shift on the highway. He had no idea that by noon, he would be sitting helplessly in his own patrol car, struggling against thick rope, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. Daniel wasn't a man who panicked easily, but the way the K9, Rex, kept pressing against the barrier between them told him something was terribly wrong. Rex was trained to stay calm, to observe, to react only when needed, but now the dog's muscles were tense, his ears locked forward, and a low rumble vibrated from deep in his chest like distant thunder. The Marine, whose name was Aaron Cole, had not planned to become part of this nightmare. He was driving through the area on leave, trying to escape the memories of war that clung to him like a second skin, when he noticed the abandoned cruiser. Something about it didn't feel right. Years of combat had taught him that danger often hid behind normal things, waiting for someone to look too closely. He had pulled over to check, expecting maybe a breakdown or a tired officer taking a nap, but what he found instead changed everything. Daniel had been barely conscious when Aaron first opened the door, his face pale, his lips bruised where the tape had been ripped away and replaced with rope. And before he could even ask what happened, Rex's sudden snarl had made Aaron freeze, because soldiers learn to trust animals more than instincts sometimes, and Rex was screaming without sound that something was coming. Aaron knew they couldn't make a single noise. Whatever had happened to Daniel wasn't over yet. Someone had tied him up, left him alive, and walked away, which meant they were either coming back or watching from somewhere nearby. Aaron raised his finger, not as a threat but as a plea for silence, because even the smallest sound could be enough to draw the wrong kind of attention. Daniel's eyes filled with desperate questions, but all Aaron could do was shake his head slightly and listen. The highway stretched out in both directions, empty and sunlit, but the tension in the air made it feel like a trap waiting to snap shut. As minutes dragged on, memories flooded Daniel's mind. He thought about the people he had helped over the years, the kids he'd guided away from trouble, the families he'd reassured during their worst days. He had always believed that doing good would somehow protect him, that being on the right side of things mattered. Now, sitting there tied up, he wondered if he had been wrong. Rex kept shifting, pressing his nose against the glass, breathing in short, sharp bursts. The dog's eyes were fixed on the tree lean across the road, and Aaron followed that gaze, slowly, carefully, knowing better than to rush. That was when he saw it, just a flicker of movement, so subtle that most people would have missed it. A shadow where there shouldn't have been one. Aaron's pulse quickened, but his face stayed calm, because fear was something he had learned to lock away. He gently reached for the knife on his belt, not to cut Daniel free yet, but to be ready. The last thing he wanted was to startle whoever was hiding out there. In war, he had learned that patience saved lives, and right now, patience was all they had. The figure emerged slowly, like a ghost stepping into daylight. It was a man, dressed in dark clothes, his posture stiff with the kind of tension that comes from knowing you've done something terrible. He held a weapon low at his side, not raised, but ready. Aaron's heart sank. This wasn't a random act. This was someone who had planned it, who had waited for the right moment to strike. Rex let out a sharper growl, and the men froze, eyes darting between the Marine and the dog. The silence stretched thin, ready to tear apart at any second. In that moment, something unexpected happened. The man's shoulders slumped, just a little, as if the weight of his choices had finally become too much to carry. He looked at Daniel, then at Rex, and then at Aaron, and for a brief second, there was a crack in his hardened expression. Aaron saw it, that flicker of doubt, and he knew this wasn't just about stopping a criminal. This was about a broken human being who had lost his way. Slowly, carefully, Aaron stepped forward, keeping his hands visible, his movements controlled. He wasn't thinking like a soldier anymore, but like a man who understood pain. The man's grip on the weapon loosened, just enough for Rex to sense it. The dog's growl softened, turning into something almost curious, as if he could feel the shift in the air. Daniel watched all of this with a mix of fear and awe, unable to speak but desperately hoping that somehow, this nightmare would end without anyone getting hurt. The men finally dropped the weapon. It hit the pavement with a dull clatter that echoed far too loudly in the quiet afternoon. Aaron didn't hesitate. In a few quick steps, he was on him, securing him, making sure there was no chance of sudden violence. Only then did he rush back to Daniel, cutting the ropes with hands that were steady despite everything. The relief on Daniel's face was overwhelming, like a dam breaking after holding back a flood for too long. Rex barked once, sharp and loud, as if releasing all the tension he had been holding inside. As the police and paramedics arrived, the truth came out in pieces. The man had been someone Daniel once helped, someone who had fallen back into darkness after being given a second chance. Anger and shame had twisted into something dangerous, something that led him to do the unthinkable. But in the end, it was the very kindness Daniel had shown him that made him hesitate, that made him drop the weapon and choose not to cross that final line. Daniel was taken to the hospital, bruised but alive, and Aaron quietly slipped away before anyone could make a fuss over him. He didn't see himself as a hero. He just saw himself as someone who happened to be in the right place at the right time, guided by a loyal dog and a moment of human connection that could have easily been lost. Weeks later, Daniel would think back to that day often, not with fear, but with gratitude. He realized that even when things go terribly wrong, even when darkness seems to win, there are still people and moments that can pull us back into the light. Rex would sit by his side, head on his knee, a silent reminder that loyalty and instinct can save lives just as surely as courage. And now, as this story comes to a close, if it touched something deep inside you, if it made you believe just a little more in the power of compassion and second chances, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe, because your support helps keep stories like this alive. Please also leave a comment telling us what part of this story moved you the most, because your voice matters here. In a world that often feels cold and divided, sometimes all it takes is one quiet moment, one brave heart, and one loyal soul to remind us that hope is never truly gone.